He stood on national television and begged the world. Begged strangers. Begged God. Please bring my girls home. Please bring Shannon home. He wiped tears. His voice cracked. The camera loved him. America believed him. They shared his face. They prayed for him. But here is the contradiction that will keep you awake tonight. While he was crying on that porch, while he was shaking his head for the news cameras, his pregnant wife and his 2 little girls were not missing. They were already dead. And he was the only living person on Earth who knew exactly where their bodies were rotting. This is not a missing person case. This is the story of the father who killed the family he claimed to love and then performed grief for an audience of millions to cover it up. By the time this video ends, you will see footage you have never seen explained this way. You will hear the exact moment the lie collapsed. And you will understand the one question that even the FBI could not fully answer. Why a man who seemed to have everything decided he needed to destroy everything to feel free. This is Untold Crime Diaries. I am your narrator. Lock your doors. Turn up the volume. Because this story starts with a smile and ends in an oil tank in the Colorado desert. Shannon Watts was 24 years old, pregnant with their 3rd child, a boy they had already named Nico. She was a wellness influencer, a mother, a woman who believed in second chances. She had married Chris Watts in 2012. To the outside world, he was the prize. The guy who worked hard, came home, played with the kids, and never missed a family photo. But perfection is a costume. And Chris Watts was wearing one that was already tearing at the seams. The family lived in Frederick, Colorado. A quiet suburb, white fences, good schools. The kind of place where people wave at neighbors and don't ask too many questions. Shannon had recently returned from a business trip to Arizona. She was tired, pregnant. She had been arguing with Chris, not about big things, but about the distance growing between them, about her feeling alone, about money, about the way he had started acting different, cold, distant, like a man who had already made a decision and was just waiting for the right hour to execute it. The morning of August 13th, 2018, Shannon came home around 1:48 a.m. She was traveling with a friend, Nicole Atkinson. They walked through the front door. They went to bed. That was the last time Shannon Watts was seen alive. But Chris was awake. And according to what he later told investigators, in a voice that never seemed to understand the weight of the words, he was about to do something that no father, no husband, no human being should ever be capable of. Freeze that frame. That is the last image of Shannon alive outside that house. Inside, Chris was waiting. Not sleeping. Waiting. By 5:27 a.m., Chris was up. He texted Shannon's coworker. He told her she had missed her 9 a.m. meeting. He said she seemed sick. But here's the detail that investigators later flagged. He never called 911. He never called Shannon's parents in panic. He called her coworker first, as if he was controlling the narrative before anyone even knew there was a narrative to control. Then he called Nicole Atkinson, the friend who had dropped Shannon off hours earlier. Nicole was the first to smell something wrong. She drove to the house. She knocked. No answer. She called Chris repeatedly. Finally, Chris answered. Calm. Too calm. She's not here. The girls are with her. Maybe she went to a friend's house. But Nicole knew Shannon. Shannon never left her girls. Shannon never missed work without warning. And Shannon was pregnant, sick with nausea. And she had left her phone, her purse, her medication, her insulin inside the house. Nicole called 911 at 1:40 p.m. that same day. The missing persons report was filed. And Chris Watts? He stepped outside onto that porch we showed you in the hook. The cameras arrived. The tears arrived. The performance began. But the clock was already ticking. Because while Chris was crying for CNN, while he was shaking his head and saying, "I don't know where they are," the bodies of his family were already hidden. Not far away. In fact, closer than anyone imagined. 45 miles northeast. An oil field. A place Chris knew intimately because he worked there. The search exploded. Neighbors formed lines through fields. Volunteers handed out flyers with Shannon's face. The FBI joined local police. It was summer, hot, and the pressure was rising like humidity before a thunderstorm. Chris gave interviews.
He spoke softly.
He used their names. Bella, Celeste, Shanann. He talked about missing them. He talked about wanting them home safe. But watch his body. Watch the way he doesn't break. Watch the way he answers questions with statements, not emotion. Watch the way he never asks the investigators the one question a real father in panic asks. Have you checked the oil site? Have you checked my workplace? Because he knew. He knew they were there. But here is where the story turns. Not with a scream, but with a camera. A neighbor, Nate Trinast, had security footage. He went back and checked the night of August 12th, the night Shanann came home. The footage showed Chris's truck backing up to the garage at 5:18 a.m. Not leaving the driveway to go to work. Backing up. Loading something. Something heavy. The truck left at 5:45 a.m. Chris was alone. That was the first crack in the wall. Then investigators pulled Chris's phone records. His texts. His location data. They found messages to a coworker. A woman named Nicole Kessinger. Not casual messages. Intimate messages. Photos.
Plans.
Chris had been having an affair. He had told this woman that he was separated. That he was a father of 2, not 3, because he had hidden the pregnancy. He had told her they were going to start fresh. A new life. But Shanann was pregnant. The family was growing. And Chris had decided, according to the messages and according to what he eventually admitted, that he could not have 2 lives. So he chose one. And he chose to erase the other. He told her he was free. But to be free, he had to make 3 people disappear. Permanently. Police brought Chris in for questioning. At first, he denied everything. He took a polygraph. He failed spectacularly. The needle spiked on every lie. But Chris was not breaking. He was calculating. Then investigators did something smart. They brought in Chris's father, Ronnie Watts. They told Chris, "We're going to search your workplace. We are searching the oil tanks." That is when Chris asked for a deal. Not for forgiveness. A deal. And in that deal, he told a story so horrifying, so calculated, that even seasoned detectives had to step out of the room. Here is what he said. On the morning of August 13th, after Shanann came home from her trip, they had an argument. Chris claimed Shanann had hurt the girls, a lie he invented, then abandoned. But then he changed the story. He said he walked into the bedroom. Shanann was strangling one of the girls. He said he lost control. He said he killed Shanann in a rage. But the girls? The girls woke up. Bella, 4 years old, walked in. She saw her father with her dead mother. And according to Chris's own words, cold, unemotional, recorded, he loaded Shanann's body into his truck. Then he loaded his daughters. Still alive. He drove them to the oil site. He buried Shanann in a shallow grave. Then he turned to his daughters. He smothered them. One by one. He put their bodies into separate oil tanks. 260 feet deep. Dark. Cold. Industrial graves. Then he drove home. He showered. He went on television. He begged for them to come home. That is the timeline of a monster. He smothered his 4-year-old. Then his 3-year-old. While they knew him. While they trusted him. While they called him daddy. That is not a crime of passion. That is execution. Police recovered the bodies on August 16th. Shanann was found in the shallow grave near the site. The girls were pulled from the oil tanks, Celeste first, then Bella. Their bodies had been submerged in crude oil for days. The autopsy results confirmed the horror. Shanann had been strangled. The girls had been suffocated. Shanann's unborn son, Nico, was also dead. Chris was charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder, including 2 counts for the death of an unborn child, plus unlawful termination of pregnancy and tampering with a deceased body. The evidence was absolute. But the trial never happened. Because Chris Watts did the only smart thing left in his entire story, he confessed. On November 6, 2018, just 3 months after killing his family, Chris Watts pleaded guilty to all counts. He was sentenced to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus 48 years for unlawful termination, plus 36 years for tampering with bodies. He will never leave prison. He will never see sunlight without bars. But the sentence did not close the questions. Because the real mystery was never how.
It was why.
Investigators and psychologists have studied Chris Watts for years. The profile is disturbing. He is classified by experts as a family annihilator, not a serial killer, not a random predator, but a specific type of murderer who eliminates his own family to solve a problem he created. His problem? He wanted a new life. With a new woman. Without the weight of a pregnant wife, 2 children, and a future he no longer wanted to build. But family annihilators rarely snap. This was not a moment of rage that spiraled out of control. The texts show planning. The truck backing up at 5:18 a.m. shows planning. The decision to drive 45 miles to a site only he knew shows planning. Chris Watts planned this. He planned to erase his family, like a mistake. And then, the part that chills every investigator who has studied him, he planned to play the victim. That is the psychology that makes this case different. He did not run. He did not hide. He performed grief. He weaponized empathy. He made an audience of strangers invest in his pain, while he knew the bodies were in tanks. That is not just murder. That is manipulation of an entire nation. Watch him cry again. But now, you know. Every tear was staged. Every word was written in advance. Every prayer he asked for was a prayer he already knew could not be answered, because he had answered it himself, with his own hands. Shanann's family, Frank and Sandra Rizosek, lost their daughter, their granddaughters, and their unborn grandson. They buried 4 people from one family. They have spoken about the pain of seeing Chris on television, knowing he was lying. They said this: "We don't hate him. We feel sorry for him, because he lost everything, and he threw it away." But forgiveness is not justice. And justice, in this case, is a prison cell in Wisconsin. A life without parole. A name that will never be spoken without the word killer attached. Chris Watts is in prison now. He has been attacked by other inmates. He lives in isolation for his own protection. Some reports say he reads the Bible. Others say he has found religion, the classic prison conversion that families of victims call too little, too late. The girls, Bella and Celeste, they are buried together in North Carolina. Shanann and her unborn son, Nico, are buried near them. A family that should have grown. A family that was erased by one man's decision that his comfort mattered more than their lives. That is the legacy of Chris Watts. Not the Instagram photos. Not the news interviews. But the silence inside those oil tanks. The silence of a father who chose himself over everyone he claimed to love. Now, before you leave, I want you to think about one thing. Chris Watts was not a stranger. He was not a monster hiding in shadows. He was the father at the school pickup, the husband at the barbecue, the coworker who smiled in the break room. He was normal, until he wasn't. That is the lesson of Untold crime diaries. Evil does not always announce itself. Sometimes it wears a wedding ring. Sometimes it cries on television. Sometimes it hugs its children, hours before it decides they are obstacles. If this video stopped your heart, if it made you think differently about the people around you, then do what this channel is built for. Comment below. Not with sympathy, with a verdict. Do you believe Chris Watts planned this for weeks? Or was it truly a moment of rage? And more importantly, do you think he feels remorse? Or is he just performing even now in prison? Comment now. I read every single one. Like this video so this story reaches the people who need to hear it. Subscribe to Untold Crime Diaries, because we are not done with the monsters hiding in plain sight. This is Untold Crime Diaries. And we will not forget their names. Bella Watts, Celeste Watts, Shanann Watts, Nico Watts, who never got to take his first breath. Rest in peace.